Hi, I'm Sheila Layton. Welcome to the Beyond Coincidence Show, where every moment holds a miracle and we talk about seeing the hand of God in our lives. Call it a God wink or a tender mercy or whatever you want. Everyone on this show has seen the hand of God or their higher power in their lives in a very real and personal way. Welcome, everybody. My special guest today is Kaye Fugel. Kaye was the youngest of a large, talented family. She felt her siblings had taken up all of the most outstanding talents, leaving her little to call her own. Fortunately, she stumbled upon social work, which is where she found her own gifts. Unknowingly, she had many social workers in her lineage. They just weren't called social workers. So she believes that it's in her blood. Kaye worked in the social work arena for several years and as an advisor at a university. She taught courses in successful life management and helped people in transition. Going to work was a joyous event for her. Eventually, she combined her love for her home, which was built by her great grandfather, her love of people, and love of art, and now has an Airbnb in her home. She just finished building a small art studio in her backyard that is now primed for her to pick up her paintbrush. Kaye traveled with her parents to many unknown parts of the world until they finally landed in the ancestral home in what is now called Cedar Hills, Utah. She graduated from Pleasant Grove High School and went to Brigham Young University, Hawaii, and Utah Valley University, earning 2 bachelor degrees, one in psychology and another in social work. She has recently become a life coach. Kaye's highest priority has always been her family. She now enjoys her 4 adult children, their spouses, and 9 beautiful grandchildren. They have all been raised with a high regard for patriotism, family, and God. Kaye loves traveling, writing, meeting and getting to know people, art, acting, serving, which is one of her love languages, getting together with friends and family, and especially recognizing the hand of God in her life. Welcome, Kaye. Thank you for taking time out of your day to chat with me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yes, so Kaye is actually a good friend of one of my husband's cousins, and Heather reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have a friend that would be great on your podcast," and I was super excited that Kaye was willing to come and do this. She has a really great story to share. But before she gets into that, Kaye, tell me about what it was like growing up in your big family. How many children? Where did you fit in? And did religion play a part in that?
I was raised in what would be called, if you were a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I was raised in the mission field, what's meant there are very few members of the church. And so because of that, my parents made it really clear that we were always an example of Jesus Christ. And even though it wasn't necessarily of trying to get people to join our church or anything, it was just being an example of Jesus Christ. I even went to Bible school and things like that to study the Bible with people from all denominations. So it was very inclusive. My I have 6 siblings, including myself, but they are all much older than me. I'm the caboose. I was the whoops. I was born 9 years after my last sibling. So I spent a lot of time alone. And we had a house on a beach. And I didn't know at the time that I lived in paradise.
Where
But
where
I
did you
spent
grow up, Kaye? Where did you grow up?
in northern Idaho, just right on the Canadian border. It's in Sandpoint, Idaho, right on the
Winston?
lake.
Okay.
Yep, most beautiful place in the world as far as I'm concerned. And and to kind of combine an answer there, a lot of children when they're young have an imaginary friend,
Yes.
and I was so immersed in the. We talked about Jesus and we talked about God regularly in our home. And when you're little, you think everybody is raised like you. And so you think everybody's like that. You don't realize it's different. And in my case, I thought everybody's imaginary friends were Jesus and God. And so at a young age, at least I can remember back at 4 years old, playing on the beach by myself, talking to Jesus and God and having them talk back to me
So
like a child might.
what did that feel like when you were little, so you're talking to them. Was it just like thoughts that came into your mind as you were talking or ideas, or how did that play out, especially as a little kid?
I remember questions, just asking little children questions and things about their lives, about Jesus's life, because I was so immersed in that. And this may sound weird, but I remember receiving answers and receiving knowledge. And never for a moment did I think that they were not with me. And
Oh, that
so that's how young I was when I knew that they were real.
wow, that's pretty fantastic. That's pretty amazing to be that young, and have had that experience. So, did you go to church every Sunday? Did you go to youth activities as a kid and a teenager? All those kind of things.
Yes, as a child, when I was younger, we had to travel a bit to get to our church house, and there was a movement going on at the time that was pretty anti our religion, and so I didn't understand as a young child. But one time we were sent home from church because the outside of the church had been covered with pig's blood.
Oh
And
dear.
so we were sent home not to attend that day. I didn't understand. And I was the only child in my grade at school that was a member of our church. And so I had friends that were older and younger that were members. And back in the day, we would go to church in the morning, and it was quite a drive. And then we'd have a break and then come back. And so I went to other members' houses that were out in the middle of nowhere for lunch or and a little break, and then come back to church again.
And
And
then,
we had
and
to,
so so these people that you went to, they were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints. And
yes,
did they have children your age that you just went and played with for a few hours till you went back to the evening meeting?
yes, usually, or else they were friends of my parents, and we would go out, and I would get to know them and their families. But usually, it was somebody close to my age if I went by myself, or else I would go with my parents, or the other way around. We would invite people over to our home, and we'd have the church, the lunch, and so on there. And another thing is, I grew up thinking a fireside was literally a fire because
So
we
explain
often
to people that are not of our faith what a fireside is actually. It is a
okay.
term that we use in our religion, but a lot of people don't know what that is. And like you said, they'll think you're sitting around a fire, which maybe in the old days they did do.
Well, in the old days when I was a kid, that's what we did. Because we lived on a beach, there was lots of driftwood, and regularly, I mean, it seems like it happened a lot. We would build a big bonfire and invite members and non-members, just people liked to gather there. My
So
parents
just
were
Christian,
very
just you have just a Christian gathering, I guess. Hey, a Christian gathering.
Christian or non-Christian. Yeah.
And then
And
would you talk
sometimes,
about Jesus? Like, because generally a fireside is a gospel discussion
right.
that we generally do with the youth of the church nowadays on a Sunday evening, and they'll just have a special guest speaker. But in those days, you actually went to the beach, built a fire, invited friends, and did you have a gospel discussion, or was it just a lighthearted fun thing?
It almost always ended up that way. Didn't necessarily start that way. We would sing, everybody would be sitting around this big fire. We would sing songs, we would talk, and then there are people who were curious about our particular religion and our beliefs and why did we were kind of weird, we didn't do some of the things that their families or the way they were raised. We did them differently. And why would we choose not to partake of certain things like alcohol and back then that wasn't drugs so much, but smoking. In fact, my father smoked, and he smoked until my brother was killed in Japan. And my dad, he had a testimony of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he also had a testimony of being with the family forever. And because of that, when my brother died, my dad quit smoking, and he became eligible to go to partake of a ceremony that is done in the temples that represent our church to seal our families together. And I was about 4 at that time too. A lot
So
happened
you
during
were
that
so
four
you were
years.
pretty little.
I was.
So we believe in our religion that if we go to the temple, which is a very sacred place for us, more sacred than a church building, we can perform an ordinance where we will be sealed together as a family for eternity. So your dad was able to participate in that when you were 4 years old.
Yeah, and it was kind of a rough lesson for him because my brother had to die. Ironically, though, when he was in the process, he was still smoking, and he was in the process of trying to quit. He was called to what is called the bishopric in our area, and the bishopric, they're the leaders. They're like the father and the helpers of what would be called our ward, which in northern Idaho was a very large area, and there were also examples. And in our particular religion, you couldn't smoke. You weren't supposed to smoke or drink coffee. And my dad did both of those things. And so when they called him into the stake president is person over a large area, including bishoprics. When he was called in, and they said they called him to the bishopric, and he said, "But I smoke and I drink coffee," and they just said, "Not anymore." And that's how he was able to quit smoking and
Wow.
drinking coffee. It just
So
he
those
got
things sort of happened at the same time, your brother's death, and they called him into the bishopric to help lead the congregation, and he had to set an example. So he's like, oh, shoot, I got to figure this out. And so did he struggle with doing that? Because, I mean, smoking and drinking coffee are very habit forming. Did he
so
struggle
I
with
was
that?
young, yeah, and he had done it most of his life. I was young. He was in his late 40s, and I remember sitting on his lap and lighting his cigarettes for him and blowing out the match. So I remember that, and it doesn't feel like any time passed from when I was doing that, and then he was getting set apart as a member of the bishopric. We had to go to Spokane, Washington for
Oh,
that. And I remember after they did that, I told him his hair was messed up. And so I was a daddy's girl, so I could say things like that. The other kids couldn't.
yeah.
But I said, "Daddy, your bangs are messed up." When they got done uh, setting him apart in the bishopric, and he was wonderful. They loved him. People loved him. He was charismatic, and he had everything he needed. He just hadn't been active for almost all of his life, and
So,
that's why.
so he wasn't even active, really. So when you were so for those first few years of your life, your mom just took you to church by herself?
As far as I can remember, I can't remember my dad not being there. So I think he supported it, um,
He
from what
just
I can
smoked and drank
remember.
coffee.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
And then,
also, he drank alcohol.
okay. And then
Also,
after that, then after he was in the bishopric, then he kind of stopped doing those things and he became more active in the faith.
yes. First of all, yes. My brother died. He decided that he wanted to become. My father decided he wanted to become more active, so he started to try to stop these things, and they called him to the bishopric. But that was, as far as I remember, it was over. No smoking, no drinking, and also he lived the gospel principles,
Right.
and he made sure that we did as well. He was a great
Wow.
leader,
Wow.
and that's
That's
why we talked about. I don't remember not talking about Jesus and God on a daily basis. Like I've mentioned, I'm surprised that they didn't set a plate at the table for him for dinner, because it was like either Jesus or God were sitting there with us.
Well, that's really cool though that you freely talked about God in your home because a lot of people don't. Even people that are religious don't talk about that. So I think that's awesome. So Kay, I know that there's an experience that you have been thinking about that you would like to share of where you've seen the hand of God in your life. So I'm just going to let you start and give some detail and background so people can see where God was moving in this experience for you. And I'll just let you go for it. If I have any questions,
Sure.
I'll interject, but you go.
Okay, we'll do that. I was lucky enough to be able to save up and plan on a trip to Italy. This was 2 years ago, or just over 2 years ago. And I was really, really excited about this trip. Um, Let me go back years earlier. I had attended a program that, again, our church put on. It was Become Self-Sufficient. And it was on finances. And I had met a couple that were just darling. And we became Facebook friends. We didn't see each other again after that. 12 years passed. We didn't see each other, and rarely did I even see any posts or anything like that. So we didn't really keep track of each other that much. But the day before I was going to leave, I put on Facebook, I'm going to Italy. And this particular friend said, my sister lives in Milan. That's it. That was the most communication we'd had for several years. Um, because I was raised to recognize miracles, my father would point out miracles and God's creations and God's hand and Jesus. And regularly, again, I was raised that way. So I thought everybody was. It wasn't until I got in my 50s that I'm like, oh, okay, people don't think that same way. They don't have those same life experiences. But I also know that whenever I'm going to do something for the Lord, that the adversary is going to try to keep me from doing it. I know
Yes.
that. I recognize I've learned to come back, circle around my my childhood imaginary friends that I listened to and talked to regularly.
Uh-huh.
There was no static, and then life happened, and then there's a lot of static. And I've learned to come back.
Your life just becomes so noisy, right? When you're a kid,
It
it's so
does.
free and easy and there's nothing coming at you. But as an adult or even a teenager and young adult, there's decisions and life and hard things. And so that communication, like you say, gets a little more staticky.
It does. And so sometimes I make choices thinking I knew better, and those are the choices I regret. But
But you are human. But you are human, Kay. You are human, right? Well,
yes,
that's okay.
and as I aged, which I've done, um, I have found that when I believe with all of my heart, I'm making a choice because I was told to make that choice by Heavenly Father. I've prayed about it, I've fasted about it, whatever, and I make a choice. I know that sometimes I even say it out loud. I'm gonna, because sometimes it's really weird things. I'm non-confrontational. I've been told to do things that would put me in the line of fire, and so I've said, okay, but you're getting me out of this if it's not right, you know.
Yeah.
And I really believe that if we make those choices with the intent of doing what the Lord wants us to do, with the intent of being obedient, that He'll bless us, even if it was the wrong choice, because He'll bless us for our obedience.
Right.
So, um, like I said, when I'm going to do something for Him, roadblocks go up, and so then I'm even more sure, because I don't believe that God, that Heavenly Father or Jesus makes. I don't believe they make bad things happen.
No, I
I
agree.
believe I believe that they give us the tools and the comfort and the knowledge and the wisdom to get through those bad things.
Right, because we live in a mortal world and hard things happen, bad things happen, people are mean, like people get sick. That's just mortality, right? It's not because God is sending these bad things to us. Like you say, I completely believe exactly what you do. Bad things happen and they help us get through it. So you were going to go to Italy.
Yes. So bad things started happening. And it started with I called to do my pre check in on the airlines. And I was getting a notice that I needed to speak to um, one of the, what do they call them? Travel.
Gate attendants?
Yeah, one of them. I needed to talk to them in the morning when I got there with my luggage. So go to the airport. You're not pre checked in, but go to the airport. It's fine. Just talk to them. And I wasn't quite satisfied with that because I do know how things can go wrong, especially when you're going to do something right. I had no idea if I was going to do something right, but I started thinking I was because things were going wrong. And so I started making phone calls. I called the airlines. I called TSA. I called everybody you can think of. And the airlines were telling me, don't worry, you just need to talk to someone when you get there. Just go to the desk, talk to them, you'll be fine. And so after an entire day on the phone, I went with my friends. I had 3 friends that were going together. I went with my friends. I went to check in, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can't go on this trip." And I said, "Well, see my messages. It says I need to just come, and everything will be okay." And they said, "No, your passport will expire within 90 days of your return flight."
Oh, brother.
And I was dying. I
Yes.
mean, that meant I could not go on this trip. And as usual, things were running smoothly for everybody else. But my friend Joe, that was with me, we put our heads together and decided, okay, I'll cancel this ticket, the return flight, and make it for an earlier flight home.
Oh, so it
So
was
I can
literally days that they were complaining about.
5 days.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's what I did. And she actually loaned me the money to do it because I had to buy a whole other ticket.
Oh, wow.
And so then I was able to board the plane and go to Italy. But the whole time, I like rules. I like to follow rules. I like to do I like to do things right. I was like, am I going to be arrested while I'm over here and be
Oh,
put in
dear.
Italian jail? And, it's just like, oh my gosh, I hope nobody finds out. Because what we did too, after putting our heads together, is we then canceled my return flight and booked another flight the same day as I was going to come home in the first place. Because the United States didn't care about my passport. And
Right.
so it was, but still, I was still wondering, am I going to get in lots of trouble for this?
Right. You're like, are they going to let me out of Italy?
Yeah, yeah. So now I'm fine. Now I had two return flights from Italy that, I don't know what to do with exactly, but I was going to wait on the second. The second day we were there, we were at a B&B. We went to Lake Como. We went to Bellagio. I mean, this was heaven. And we were supposed to catch a ferry from Bellagio. And I suddenly had a craving for cheese. I don't like pizza, but I love cheese. And we had 15 minutes to catch the ferry. And so my friend and I looked up one of those in Bellagio. The buildings are quite close together, but they have stairways in between, and they're cobblestone, so they're a little
Okay.
bit uneven. And we looked up, we saw pizzeria, just a little sign up this little narrow area. So we ran up there, and I asked the man who worked there. I said, can you make me a pizza in 10 minutes? Because I have to catch a ferry in 5 minutes. And he's, oh, yeah, no problem, no problem, no problem. I didn't think that maybe he didn't understand me. And so he's throwing the pizza and making it beautiful and painting it as though he was an artist, with the sauces and the cheese. And I'm dying. My friend's dying.
You're looking at your watch going, we gotta go.
Uh-huh. And time passed, and we were supposed to be catching the ferry. And so my girlfriend grabbed the pizza. I paid for it. We ran out the doors. We're running down those cobblestone stairs. On the third stair from the bottom, my sandal caught on a cobblestone, and I tripped and I flew out from between the two buildings like Superman. I just flew right out into a very crowded area with people eating, and I landed on the ground, and I knew it hurt. But I'm the youngest in a family. I always had to keep up with everybody. I also
Right.
knew I needed to get to that ferry. So Joe, my girlfriend, turned around, grabbed me, put my arm over her, and pretty much dragged me to catch the ferry. And it just so happened the ferry was late that day.
Well, good thing.
Yeah. So I shared my pizza with them, and then we got on the ferry, and things started taking a turn for the worse. And my ankle swelled up. I have skinny ankles. You couldn't even see my ankle bones. It swelled up into what looked like a psychedelic filled water balloon. I
Oh,
mean, it
wow.
was horrible, and I couldn't put any weight on it. And so when we got off the ferry, they went around and did things. I sat and waited for them.
Aw.
And I even have pictures of me sitting there. But what better place to be when you're going to be sitting around is looking at Lake Como and the beauty and the architecture and the art, from a bench.
So you were feeling like, well, this is okay. My ankle hurts, but it's beautiful here.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in the pictures, I'm smiling. And so then we went back, and when we got back to Bellagio, it was obvious I couldn't walk. And so we tried to find some place for help. We got an ace bandage, and when we got back to our Airbnb, my girlfriend gave me a compression sock to put on my ankle. But I was in horrible pain.
Oh, yeah.
So Joe, my girlfriend, and I started looking to see if we could find anybody from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if we could find a member, or if we could find missionaries, which are young men and women that dedicate 1.5 to 2 years of their lives to going all over the world and spreading the gospel of our church. We couldn't find anything, and we looked online. We did everything we could, and I began to panic. I really felt like I needed a priesthood blessing. I've had lots of them in my life. I've never had to search for anybody, and they've always worked, and they can be given by worthy male members of our religion. And I really did begin to panic. I had never been without that gift to be able to be healed or comforted or something by a priesthood blessing.
Right. And you guys had been trying and you just hadn't had any luck finding anyone, which is very unusual.
I know. And a lot of people didn't even know what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or Mormons, they didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
So they couldn't help us. And finally, we got to Venice, and I remembered that one Facebook post from my long lost friend that said, "My sister lives in Milan." And so I didn't know if she was a member of the church. I didn't know if, why she was in Milan. But I reached out to my friend that had sent me that text or that Facebook message and asked her if she thought her sister might know of somebody that might know of how I could contact elder, which would be one of the young men, or a member of the church, or somebody that could give me a blessing. And I really was panicked.
Yeah.
She wrote back immediately, and she said, "My sister's name is Jill. She'll reach out to you."
Oh, wow.
And so we went into Venice, and there's lots of bridges in Venice. So we went into Venice.
It's on my bucket list. It's on my bucket list. I just have to do.
Well, it should be on your bucket list several times. It is amazing. But there's a lot of bridges because it's on water.
Sure.
So tons of it's not crossing a road, it's crossing a bridge. And my poor friend Joe was so sweet as she stayed behind with me and practically carried me because I couldn't walk on my left foot. And I got an answer from Jill, and come to find out, she and her husband were serving in what's called a mission presidency in Milan. Her husband was serving, and they were having what's called a zone conference, which is when all of the missionaries in the area come together. And she said, "We'll send 2 of our best missionaries to
come find you."
Yes, and the zone conference was going to go until 5 p.m. And I know that their curfew is relatively early. And over there, it got dark early. Mm-hmm. But they said they'd be there. And so when my other friend plans trips, it's like your own Rick Steves. I don't know if you know what that is, but he writes books about where to go, where to eat, and so she's had our days planned out.
Super planned out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even what time you need to be at a bus stop,
Wow.
Turn down to those details. But they added one more thing. And when they added one more thing, then Joe, she was probably very tired because she'd been dragging me around all day. She and I decided to go back to our little Airbnb in Venice, which is in a little bit of a scary area. I doubt the missionaries had ever been there. And waited for them to come. And sure enough, it was probably around 7:00. They arrived. And interestingly enough, one of them lives within a couple of blocks of me. I didn't know him.
Oh, he was from Idaho or from Utah. Where were you living at the time?
Utah.
In Utah. So he lived within a few blocks of your home in Utah.
Yes.
But you didn't know him.
No, I didn't know him. And he was friends with 2 young men that I do know that live even closer to me. They were best friends and they were all serving missions at the same time.
Wow, that's so
What
cool.
I did not know is they were at that place, and I know it happens with a lot of missionaries. They were at a spot where they were all questioning, can I learn this language? This is hard. I don't know if I can do this. But from what I understand, most missionaries go through something like that.
Sure. And this young man was kind of at that stage in his mission where he was questioning, should I even be here?
Yes. Yes.
So here's God's
And,
hand working in all of this, right? Like
oh, I mean, there's no doubt. There's no question.
just all the
Um,
little details is where God's hand is, right?
and
So
that's why I'm giving you the details,
I love
is
it.
because that makes it so up in hindsight. You look back and go, oh, clear back 12 years ago to where I met that Facebook friend. So it's
Right.
like it started then,
Yes.
when these kids were like 8 years old or 7 years old.
Yes.
And so the one of them, they both had the same name. Not well, they all go by Elder, but they both have the same first name, which I thought was funny. And one of them had been there and was getting ready to he'd be coming home like in less than a year. The other one was new. The
Okay.
one that lives close to me was relatively new. They were so happy to speak English.
Oh,
And we were
yes.
so, I mean, my heart, I can't tell you how full my heart was that we had found them and they were able to make it to Venice, which is almost a planes, trains, and automobiles type thing to do when you're in Milan. And to be there for me, to give me a blessing and help maybe relieve some of my pain. And so they were funny, they were happy, we were hugging, which they don't do on missions except in this kind of situation when I was a mom,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're just very, very careful. And so what they did was they started to give me a blessing, and the process is there's always at least two elders. The process is one of them would use sacred oil that's been consecrated for healing and comfort. So one of them put oil on my head, just like back in biblical times,
Right. They anointed you. Yeah.
and anointed me with that oil to prepare me for the blessing. And that was the one that was from my area. The other one that had been out for some time then put his hands on my head and started giving me a blessing. It was very sweet. I didn't expect a lot. He was young, and as you grow older, doing this over and over and over again, you have ways of saying things. And what he said made me go, uh-oh, they're not supposed to say that. He said directly, and I have a witness. He said, you will be healed and without pain for the duration of your trip. And I'm
Wow.
like, okay, you got to say something like, if it be thy will, or according to your faith, or something. You
Right.
don't just say you're going to be healed and without pain, when obviously I had a broken foot,
Right.
a painful one. But then he said it, and then he went on with the blessing, and then he said it again. You will be healed and without pain for the duration of your trip. And that's word for word.
Wow.
And the same thing, I'm like, oh, he's young. Maybe I should let them know that he's saying these things, because
Oh, ye of
I'm going
little
to give
faith.
a threat. They're
Oh,
actually saying, you're going to have a miracle. And so we took pictures, laughing, took pictures and with them, and they were on their way. And I was
did
just
you question him about what he said at all? No, you didn't
no.
say anything because you're like, that's fine. We're just going to go forward and not worry about it. Yeah.
Also, I'm really careful with my faith. And I felt like at the moment, questioning him would have been questioning my faith, because he said it at a time when his words are guided by
Yes.
God
And he said it twice.
twice.
Yeah.
I actually thought I heard it 3 times, but Jo, my girlfriend, she heard it twice, so I say twice, just so there's no exaggeration possibility.
Right.
But she heard it twice too. And so Jo is friends with the 3 young men that I said that from my area, and one of them was the one that anointed my head. She's friends with their families, and so she sent them pictures of these cute missionaries with these great big grins on their faces and us hugging them.
Right.
It made their mothers, the two missionaries I had, that made their mothers so jealous that we got to hug their sons because they were living over here. One of the elders was from Oregon, and there I was in Italy hugging their son.
Yes, that's priceless for sure.
Yes. And so I did keep in touch with those two mothers, because it actually keeps going. This just keeps going, miracle after miracle. So they left, and I asked them how they were getting home. Transportation would have been an issue. They were quite a ways away from Milan. And they said, we're covered. We're good. Don't worry about it. I didn't see cars. I didn't see bikes. But they assured me that they were okay. So my girlfriend sends these pictures out. I went in, took a bath, and went to soak my foot, went to bed. And I'm going to put a little caveat in here. Little did I know that not only had I broken my foot, on my left foot, I torn the meniscus on my right knee, I overextended both thumbs, and I tore the rotary cuff in my shoulder. I didn't know that. I was just focused on that great big foot. In the morning, I woke up, and I didn't have a broken foot. I didn't have any swelling. There was no discoloration, and I could put full weight on my foot.
Wow.
And I've got to tell you, I was kind of reprimanding myself for questioning whether this young man should have said that or not. Because it happened. I didn't have a broken foot or any other issues. I was able to go the rest of the trip. I was able to ride bikes. I climbed to the 420 stairs to the top of the Duomo. I was able to do everything and keep up with everything that we did. In fact, when I did take those 420 steps, I didn't have to stop.
Wow.
When they have, usually you stop. I just went, and I got up there. And then I remembered I was afraid of heights. But other than that, it was really amazing because I had a broken foot. At least I thought I did. And so I found out, I thanked them for sending these missionaries, and I told them what happened. The mission president and his wife, I told them what happened. Little did I know that was going to become the story. And so she wrote me back and said that whenever her husband went to the airport to pick up new missionaries or goes to the airport to take missionaries home, he relayed the story about how this young missionary, 21 years old, made a miracle happen. And after enjoying my trip in Italy, I didn't get to take the same flight home with my friends because I had a different flight.
Right.
I was all by myself. And the flight home nothing really happened. But I got at Chicago O'Hare, and if anybody loves that airport, I'm so sorry. Because I don't like that airport. And I was dragging my stuff around and trying to get through. And I finally got on the airplane to come to Salt Lake City. And the flight attendant said, would you mind letting us check your bag? I'd had so many things kind of go wrong that I had consolidated everything into one bag because I wanted to keep a hold of it.
Right. I can understand that.
Yeah. But I was on that last leg, and I told her that I really didn't want to. She said, I promise you it'll be right at the bottom of the stairs. We had to go to Salt Lake City, the airport was being remodeled. And so they had to let us off on the tarmac where you go down the stairs. And for those of us that put the luggage at that time, the luggage was right at the bottom of the stairs. If you had a carry-on and you voluntarily let them take it.
Right.
It was late at night and it was raining. And so I let them take my bag. I sat down, the airplane took off, and suddenly my foot started to swell up.
Oh boy.
And to the point where I had to take my shoe off. And then all this discoloration started to return to my foot on the airplane. And of course, I thought, this is the duration of my trip.
Yeah, because he said the duration of your trip, didn't he? Yeah.
He did. By the time we got to Salt Lake City, I was almost in tears. I was in so much pain. And like I said, it was dark and raining. Went down to the bottom of the stairs. Everybody picked up their bags except mine.
Oh no.
It was missing.
Of course it was.
And so I had one of the nice guys, we're drenched. It was just raining hard. Was trying to help me find it. He jumped on the bus and said, did anybody take the wrong bag? Nobody did. He told me, well, get on the bus and I'll keep looking. And so I did. And I'm trying to walk on this foot by myself. And I'm soaking wet and tears but you couldn't tell because I was all wet. And I went to all of the different, what are the baggage claim places?
Mm-hmm.
No bag. And I'm like, okay, the adversary, he didn't get to win. He didn't get to win. He didn't keep me from going on this trip. But he stole my bag, you know, and he just that last little punch. And after probably 45 minutes.
Did you start praying at that point? Like, Heavenly Father, I just need my bag.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Constant prayer in my heart. You can see why. There's always things happening. And so I went to one of those baggage claims. It didn't even have the name of an airline above it. It was just out in the middle of nowhere by itself, the opposite end. And there on that turnstile thing was my bag. One bag. Just going around in circles all by itself.
Well, there's a miracle for you.
Right?
Yeah.
So I got my bag. I got home. It was a Sunday. Monday, I went into the doctor. I had to have a screw put in my foot. You know, these are things afterwards. I had to have a screw put in my foot. I had to have my ACL, my meniscus repaired. I'm in physical therapy. I mean, all of this because I went to Italy. And the parents, I'm being very careful here. I've talked to people and said, is it okay if I tell this story?
Right.
So the parents of two of the young men actually, okay, so the one that gave me the blessing, his mother said that he had received a blessing before he left on his mission that said a very specific thing. And it hadn't happened. And he was getting close to going home. And she said that was it. He was supposed to meet me. He was supposed to have that experience.
You were being the fulfillment of that blessing that he was given, that your situation was what he had needed on his mission, something very specific. And that's why he needed to be in Italy. And you were the fulfillment of that.
Yes. And then the other one that was with him, that's when I found out that he had been struggling. But the pictures with us, the big grins on our faces, when they were sent out to these other two young men's families who passed them on to them, I can quote one of them. He said, because he was struggling, he was talking about coming home. And he said, well, if his friend can do it, with that big smile on his face, he said, so can I. So the experience took part in keeping all four of them on their missions. And
then the two that were with you saw a miracle. Right? They saw the hand of God in your life through the power of the priesthood, which we believe is the power of God on earth. And they were able to be part of that miracle. So that totally increased their faith. It's an experience that they will never forget, even when they're old. They will always remember that, Kaye. And you were part of that. And don't you think that's why the adversary did not want you to go on this trip? Because you were going to provide an opportunity through your pain for these young men to see God's hand.
And I would do it all over again. As wonderful as my almost 2-week trip was to Italy, that was my favorite part. Was
Oh,
having a literal miracle. I can't deny it. My friend can't deny it. The mission, nobody can deny. And then coming home and getting the X-rays, and yeah, you had a broken foot. You need a screw in your foot.
yeah, not just a
You know,
broken foot,
so
but a real bad one. Yeah.
yeah. So there's no denying that during the duration of my trip,
Yeah.
I experienced a miracle, which came through their hands to heal me
Yeah.
and boost all of our faith
Yeah.
in
Oh,
that power.
Kaye, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that and for giving us the details so that we could see the way that the Lord worked through that whole experience of how it needed to shape your faith and the faith of those 4 young men. Like, that's fantastic. So, one quick last question. Why do you think it's important to recognize the hand of God in your life?
Well, I might be the wrong person to ask because, like I said, as far as I knew, they were my Christ and God were my imaginary friends that I've had all of my life. And when I was younger, I recognized their voice. I recognized their promptings. I didn't question them at all. And then again, like I said, static. And now as an adult, for maybe the last 15 years, I'm bringing myself back to that little girl who remembers what it was like having them right with her all the time. And I recognize their voice and their promptings again. And I recognize the adversary. And I don't think I would be able to say that had I not had experience. You know, when I follow what they say, see, that's what I was supposed to do, you know? And also recognize the adversary because he's very wise. And he knows how to make us think that there's a better way.
Yeah, that won't bring us joy, though. It looks better, it looks easier, it looks more bright and blingy or whatever, but that's not the path that's going to bring you joy. And sometimes there can be confusion there, right? Because, the adversary is a spirit as well and can put thoughts in our mind that we think might be better. And so, like you say, sometimes we got to be really, really careful, but good will win over evil.
And if I didn't have that in my life, if I didn't have I know I have a long ways to go still, but at least I have that planted seed that helps me recognize. I mean, it's who I am. It's made me who I am. And hopefully I can be a good example for the rest of my life. And hopefully I have been in the past.
Well, thank you, Kaye. I appreciate so much you coming and sharing that very personal experience with us today. And I just appreciate it. So thank you so very much for coming and chatting with me today.
Well, and thank you for doing this. I'm so glad you're sharing these kinds of experiences with people. I think people need to hear them.
All right. Well, thanks, Kaye. Have a good day. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you have an experience where you have seen the hand of God or your higher power in your life, I want to hear about it. Please send an email to Sheila@beyondcoincidence.com. Have a great day.